This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Boz Digital Labs, and JZ Microphones. So get ready to rock.
People want to expand their business. They may not have the capital, so they need the loan to do it. But if that loan is going to be a really big number, then that might be an indicator too. Maybe you're not ready for this next step. If you need to borrow that much money to make this next move, maybe you really need to consider, is that the right direction? Or should you save up and try to scale into it slowly?
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac, the speed to create, the capacity to dream. Now find out how awesome your studio can be at OWC. This episode is sponsored by Boz Digital Labs, offering you the coolest plugins for your mixes like the Hoser XT and Plus 10 dB Signature Series. You can transform your drums with Sasquatch Kick Machine or Transgressor, get massive bass with Big Clipper, or add width and depth using Mongoose and Imperial Delay. All Boz Digital Labs plugins are available as fully functioning, no time limit free trials, so you can check them out on your mixes right now. Just go to bozdigitallabs.com or click the link in the show notes of this episode. This episode is sponsored by JZ Microphones with the unique Golden Drop capsule design. The Black Hole Series BH1S and BH2 microphones with the hole in the middle for a one-of-a-kind shock mount combine innovative industrial design with careful craftsmanship to bring a world-class sound to your studio, resulting in a level of quality and detail in your recordings that you won't find in other mics. Go to jzmic.com or click the link in the show notes below and use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR right now to get an incredible 50% off. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals and sometimes other professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. Today I'm bringing you a podcast episode that is not specifically about recording, but about the business side of recording. In fact, it's specifically about the accounting side of recording. Every year in April here in the US, it's tax season. And for those of us working professionally in the recording studio, that means organizing all the income, bills, and expenses of the year to see how we did and then send off a check to the IRS to show our gratitude to Uncle Sam. So today I have a guest that will help us better understand how to organize your recording business and manage your money the smart way. My guest is Jared Eliseo, a licensed CPA with over 10 years of invaluable experience, having worked with some of the largest accounting firms and businesses in the world. In 2014, he began using his talent to fill his true passion of opening his own CPA firm. Currently located in Charlotte, North Carolina, he now serves Main Street small business owners by offering customized one-on-one financial and accounting services. And by helping others navigate their financial worlds, Jared has saved clients impressive sums of money and helped them avoid making devastating financial decisions. His focus on efficiency has saved businesses thousands of man-hours by streamlining processes to allow owners and employees to work more effectively. Jared works hard to be the best CPA in Charlotte, North Carolina, providing a variety of business and professional services to his clients. His firm, Eliseo CPA LLC, is the go-to firm in Charlotte for tax preparation and financial planning. Outside of the office, he spends time with his wife, is an athlete, likes to work in his community, and get involved in other things. And I know Jared because when I was looking for a bookkeeper to work with to really sort of make sure that my recording business and Recording Studio Rockstars were being done the right way, I actually went way outside of my comfort zone and started out by searching on Craigslist and then started a dialogue with Jared. Here we are years later, and we've been working together, and it's going great. Please welcome Jared Eliseo to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jared, are you ready to rock, dude?
I am ready. Thank you, Lidge.
You're welcome, man. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. It's a nice break from the grind right now, doing tax returns endlessly. So happy to be here.
Right. We are in tax season. So for you, it's like, it's crunch time.
Yes, sir.
Again, this is a bit of a departure from talking about, how to put a microphone on something, but it's super important. And quite honestly, it's one of tax season when you're working professionally in the studio can be one of the most stressful times of year where you're like, oh man, what am I going to do now? I don't want to deal with it. Or you're thinking, I really need to get my act together. So I thought it'd be really cool to have you on the show and just kind of talk, get into some specifics, but also kind of talk generally about the sorts of things that we need to know as recording studio owners, as producers, engineers, musicians, to really improve our ability to manage our money.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for a lot of business owners in general, tax time can be stressful, especially if you don't have your ducks in a row, if you don't have your finger on the books and you're not tracking all of that, which, let's be real, most business owners just aren't interested in that. They want to see the results, but they don't want to do the work to get the results. And that's not why people go into business. No one really wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to do my accounting for my business. They want to do whatever it is they're doing. If they're in the recording studio world, they want to be doing that. That's what their passion is. That's why they started their business.
So, Jared, I've kind of given an introduction to you from your bio, but let us know a little bit more in your own words who you are and how you got into this stuff, and what your interaction is with some of the smaller businesses that might be like a recording studio. Sure.
So, you kind of nailed it on the head with my little intro there that you gave. After so many years of working in the large corporate arena and the doldrums there, you sending everything into a black hole. You do something, it goes to somebody, you never hear about it again. You get a little burned out, you get no gratitude for your work, so you move on. And now I get to work with the owners of companies. Every decision that you help them make it has a meaningful impact on what they're going to do next. So whether it's a tax election or should we buy this vehicle, piece of equipment, whatever it is, it's going to have a big impact one way or another. And so they're really looking to a professional for that guidance. And it's more rewarding in that sense.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's been really cool to just, kind of have a relationship with you and be able to talk about what's going on with this, and also get encouragement from you about how to set up my business properly to move forward and actually grow it.
Yeah. I mean, since we've started working together, and that was, I think about 2 years ago, I've watched your business grow substantially, and you've had questions for me, kind of what do we do with this? And, we've troubleshooted some of that information along the ways. And I know you've got some other advisors that you work with too, but it's good to have a little bit of a team around you if you want to think of it that way, rather than trying to do it all yourself. It's worth its weight in gold. The responses, the answers that you can get from having these professionals in your life, it will save you in the long run.
So a couple of things that I feel like I really noticed about doing this was once you and I got a system in place for working together, I found it was really wonderful to be able to easily get a snapshot of how things are doing and sort of at any point in time say, hey, how am I doing today compared to last year or the year before? And that's really encouraging. In the same way that if you're making records and you're trying to see if your mixing is improving or your recording process is improving, it's wonderful to be able to just easily see whether your business is moving forward or whether you're, spinning your wheels in a certain area. And it's great to have those kind of like immediately accessible reports. And then the other one, which is just like a no-brainer, is when it comes to tax time, to be able to say, hey, can we turn in what we need? And it's like, maybe I have to answer a few questions, but it's so 1,000 times more easy than it ever was when I would have, boxes and boxes of receipts and, go into an office with piles of paperwork and try and go, oh my God, what am I going to do now?
Right. And I can tell you this, your tax accountant appreciates that too. Just being able to take an electronic report, an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF and just pull numbers off of that that are already put together and in great order. And that, now your stuff's done in January. I mean, it takes me a couple of weeks to wrap you up, but we're done by the end of January and you've got last year's results. But I want to touch on what you said previously, having that comparable measurement, being able to look back at the previous, quarter, month, year, and say, hey, how am I doing? We can't measure things we can't see. So if we're not keeping track of our information and we're just pulling it together last minute, we're probably never going to get ahead just because we have nothing to shoot for. I could say I want to do 200,000 in revenue this year, but if I don't know what I did last year, it may not be a practical goal.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an expression of what gets managed, what gets measured gets managed. Sorry.
Sure. Absolutely.
And it's like if you're not keeping track of things, you don't really have a benchmark by which to see if you're improving.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about what it means to, where do you begin? Let's just start at the beginning. So let's say somebody has a recording studio and they're at the stage where they're thinking, I think I want to do this for my living. I want to do this right. What's the very first thing they need to consider?
I would say in that case, if we're talking about someone who wants to go full-time on their own, you definitely want to figure out what your business structure is going to be. And I won't talk too much about that. Just, that's more of a legal thing, but let's decide if we want to have a corporation or an LLC, or if we just want to be a sole proprietor. That would absolutely be the starting point. And you can ask an accountant, you can ask an attorney. They may give you different answers. You might want something that you can grow with over time. But the best advice I can give you in the beginning too is keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Don't overplan, because that may just be putting more burden on you in the beginning than you necessarily need or want. So,
right. As I recall, every time I would try and get my act together in the past, it quickly ballooned into what seemed like too big of a task to really move forward on.
Right.
Until I started working with you and we finally did it.
Yeah, but now it's all humming along. So I think it's in the beginning, it's just worth consulting with somebody or doing a little bit of cursory research. Keep it simple, but learn your options and figure out which of those options are best for what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. All right, well, let me start with what I would say is a typical description. I know it was for me. I work with people who are coming out of school, and are in that beginning stages of what they want to do as a career. And it all starts with like, I love music. I love recording. I'm doing this. Now people are, I might get my first job getting paid a little bit here and there. You maybe get hired as an employee somewhere, but more likely you're getting bits of income from different jobs that you get hired for, which would be a contractor situation. Mm-hmm. And then you begin to learn that you're going to need to figure out how to manage this stuff and then transition into something else. Do you want to describe a little bit about what it means to just be an individual doing this stuff, and then what you're transitioning into, what might make sense as on that small scale?
Sure. So a great way to tell, and this is for those of the audience that may not know the form numbers. If you are ever approached or work with somebody who wants you to fill out form W-9, that's a really good sign that you're going to be paid as a contractor, and you'll be responsible 100% for all of the taxes that come with that. So it's very important that you track your expenses when if that's the case, because now you're responsible for writing things off against your income. But it sounds like a lot of the newer entrants into this type of business will be working as contractors. So if that's the case, in the beginning, it might make sense if you just have 1 or 2 gigs that you're working, maybe just get a spreadsheet going. And you just want to track your expenses. And some of the common expenses you would track would be your mileage. If you have to buy certain equipment to fulfill your duties.
Oh, yeah, we got to buy certain equipment, all right.
I'm sure you guys buy all sorts of stuff, and it's not cheap.
Yeah.
You want to keep track of that as well. And then there's repairs on that equipment too. If you buy something, it breaks or it needs to be serviced just to stay in working order, you want to track those expenses. But a simple spreadsheet in the beginning will accomplish this. You're probably just getting checks or getting, Venmo, you're getting transferred funds, things like that from 1 or 2 people. Maybe you're not issuing a lot of invoices. So in the beginning, you don't need like a QuickBooks or anything like that. You could just kind of keep track of the income separately in a quick spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So.
And, when I started this stuff, you could do a spreadsheet, but we didn't have things like Google Docs and places that were just sort of like online where you could find it 10 years later very easily. Right. You would have had to set something up on your computer. But yeah, just keeping track of stuff. So, I think the first things that people are buying today, they're getting themselves a laptop. They are getting some kind of interface to record with, a microphone. Maybe they've got some instruments. My understanding, those are all deductible expenses because they're part of what you do for work. I mean, that guitar that you have that you need to buy strings for may very well be part of what you do with your recording.
Right. Absolutely. And you want to be careful not to blur the lines between what's considered a hobby and what's considered meaningful income. Mm-hmm. And so one way we can tell as taxpayers, is this meaningful income to us? Well, does it represent a significant portion of your overall income? Are you working at a bank, a bank making $100,000 a year during the week, and then you do recording on the weekends and you're making $5,000 a year? Someone might say at the IRS, this doesn't really look like it's meaningful to you. It's not representing a big portion of your income. But flip the tables on that. If you're making $100,000 a year and then you've got a side gig paying $5,000, yes, this is absolutely meaningful. You also want to avoid writing off, successive years of losses. So writing off enough deductions to post a loss after loss every year. That would also be a red flag to the IRS.
Right. If your business is always losing money, then the IRS might look at it and say, this is a hobby.
Right. And from an economic standpoint, nobody in their right mind would run a business that continuously loses money.
Right. Right. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can go to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level. And you can start right now with my free introduction to mixing course, Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you are in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Okay, so I do think a lot of people start out where maybe they're trying to save up and buy the computer, the interface, the microphones, the stuff they want. But meanwhile, their initial income is like they're driving Uber, or they're picking up a restaurant gig. They're working in the grocery store. And so those are things that are starting to bring in money. Those are things where you would get W-2 form, right? Where you're just hired for the gig. Right.
If you're at a restaurant or whatever, you're working retail, you're going to get a W-2. Taxes are most likely taken out on that. So there's not a lot of concern about that. Uber and Lyft, if you're doing that type of work, that gig economy work, they do not withhold taxes. So again, you would just want to be mindful. Fortunately, I think that they track the miles for you too. So it's pretty easy for you to kind of cobble together what the final answer is going to be at the end of the year. Mm-hmm.
So is there anything complicated about doing both work for hire and contract work at the same time and mixing those, or do you just treat each one like its own thing?
If there's nothing too complicated about it, I would track both of those separately. So if you were working at a restaurant and you drove Uber and you were doing recording on the side, I would just keep the recording and the Uber driving separate. The work that you're doing at a restaurant or retail, whatever you might do for more steady employment, that's just money coming in personally. So you don't need to worry too much about that. But these other, if you have 4 different types of hustles that you're doing on the side in addition to that, you just want to try to have 4 different spreadsheets for them and track the expenses and the income separately.
Okay, that's cool. I think that's one of the first light bulb aha moments for interns that I might be trying to give advice to, is they don't realize that this stuff that they're doing with recording, that they have deductible expenses at this point. There is, you mentioned that you don't want to be a business that's losing money over and over again. But let's say the first thing you need to do is spend $5,000 to $10,000 getting started, but you're not making much in your recording yet. One of the things I remember learning about was the idea of depreciation on things. Not that we need to get too technical with it, but is that a way to understand that, I just spent thousands on this computer, and even though I'm not making thousands this year, that's still deductible over the next few years?
Well, the recent tax law changes would probably allow us to just write it all off in year 1. And as long as you're sticking with the trade for a few years, you'll get the maximum benefit in year 1, which is where you want it, because you purchased all that equipment. You really don't want to turn around and just wait 4 or 5 years to get the benefit for it. So take the benefit up front, in year 1, so you don't pay any taxes for sure. And then in the following years, as the business grows, you've already taken that benefit. So now, as you start generating income, you will have to pay tax in the future. But that's okay.
Yeah.
Now you've had a chance to get your feet wet.
That's your goal. All right. So cool. So it's wonderful. When people first realize that this is stuff that's worth keeping track of, so that because it's a deductible expense moving forward as you grow your business. And what is when we're setting up our business, I know that we don't have to get too technical with it, but there's sole proprietor is kind of who we are if we don't do anything. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you can consider things like an LLC. You can consider an LLC that is sort of you're the only member of the LLC. So it's kind of like a combination of being a sole proprietor and having a protected company at the same time.
Correct.
Okay. What is an EIN or an IN, or how do you say that?
No, it is. You were right the first time. It is EIN. So that stands for Employer Identification Number. And that is a number that you can get from the IRS directly. And they assign that to new businesses so that it's kind of like the Social Security number of the business. And it protects the business owner's identity a little bit too, so you're not passing out your social everywhere. It's also used to get bank accounts, credit cards, if you're approved for them under the business. And you can use that number to file tax returns as well.
Okay. Where do we go for something like that? Does somebody just go on the internet, or do you go down to the Chamber of Commerce or something?
So you can go online and do it. You could go to irs.gov, or just if you pop into Google, IRS EIN for a new business, I'm pretty sure the first result will be the application to do it. Okay,
cool. So you get that started, and now you have this official number to start, running your business. Now, what about the importance of a bank account? Do we need to have? Do we just keep using the bank account that we've been using? I mean, that's obviously where we started. We probably just have the one, and we're just trying to avoid getting fees from, Bank of America for overdrafts. But,
sure.
At some point, you're making a little bit, and you're trying to keep that organized. What do we need to know about bank accounts?
So I would say start your business. You could use your personal account for the first 6 to 12 months. After you've gotten some traction, you kind of feel good about it. This is going to persist. We're going to stay with this. Go open a second bank account for your business only. It's going to help track things, especially at the end of the year. If you need to go back and look at something, you really only have to look in one bank account, and it helps keep the math even. So if you bring in, $1,000 into your bank account, you pretty much know I only have $1,000 business dollars to spend. Mm-hmm. And if I don't spend it, whatever's left over at the end of the year is probably taxable. So it's a easier system for tracking expenses too.
Now you still got to eat and live on some of the money you're making. So what do we do with that? I mean, I guess I've learned you can just transfer some money from your business account over to your personal one. Mm-hmm. And then that becomes, what do you call that as far as bookkeeping?
So in bookkeeping, you would call that maybe an owner's distribution or a draw, or pay, personal pay for the owner. I think the sticky thing that most new business owners aren't aware of, even though you've taken that money out of your business, that money is still taxable. So you want to get into the habit of preparing your quarterly estimated income tax returns. And that would be simply, again, you just go online and kind of Google that, and you'll find the forms and the calculation, and you'll send a check into the federal government once a quarter. Here again, like you said earlier, paying Uncle Sam your dues for the privilege of being a business owner.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, cool. So you create a separate business account. I will tell you one of the very exciting things about doing that, which is probably the first reward, is if it's the name of your studio or the name of your production company, is when they send you a nice shiny debit card with your business name printed on it. That feels pretty good. And that makes you feel real happy about having gone through the effort to do all that. And it's not that hard to do. I mean, once you do it, it's pretty cool. And then when people, I don't think I see checks as often as maybe in the past, but if somebody wrote a check to you, they could just write your business name down on the check and you can deposit it in that account that way.
Right.
Now, any advice about what we should do with income as it comes in? Is there, how do you, people are paying you through PayPal, Venmo, maybe checks, maybe cash. What do you do with that money when it arrives?
Well, when it arrives, are you talking from a tax perspective or?
Sure. Yeah. Just as far as like, are there any, is it just as simple as deposit it in the bank account and that's it? Or is there any additional moves that make it a smart way to keep track of all that stuff?
Oh, yeah, for sure. When the money comes in, even if it's cash, just deposit it into the bank account that you've set up. And I try to use a simple measure for taxes. If you didn't want to go through all the calculations for estimated taxes, you could maybe take 25% off the top. It's going to be different for everybody, so it's hard to say there's just a hard and fast, answer to the question. But generally speaking, if you're just starting out and you have a lower household income, less than $50,000, $40,000, you could probably just take 25% of whatever comes in. So a great example would be if you were to rent out your studio and collect a $500 fee for doing that, and we decided 20% was the right amount to withhold, you could just take $100 of that and set it aside for taxes.
Okay, and then it's there when you need it. You might not need all 100, but at least you've got enough set aside.
Right, exactly. Or you might need more, but at least you've got a fair amount set aside already. So at the end of the year, your tax preparer is not handing you a $5,000 tax bill that you didn't save anything for.
Right. And we've had a number of guests on the podcast talk about, that being one of their bits of advice is make sure you're setting aside money for taxes every year, because it's no fun if all of a sudden you get a giant bill and you're like, I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah.
One easy way to do that is make a second account. Banks will let you make a number of accounts. You could have your business account, and then you could have a separate tax account, and then you just simply transfer over some money pretty easily and try and keep that in a little, safe digital envelope so that it's there at the end of the year when you need it, or at the quarterly
right
due time.
whatever obstacle you have to put in your way to make sure you don't spend it would be best. So make it hard to access. But for sure, having two accounts it's not a bad thing. It's probably better practice than just having one account. I will say to your listeners, it would be ideal to work with a regional or a smaller local bank rather than a Bank of America or a Wells, unless you've got a relationship with that bank already, because the smaller banks won't charge fees and they usually are small business owner friendly.
Okay.
So that's a little tip. And bank fees, I've seen bank fees really eat up profits too. It's not unreasonable for me to see clients come in with $500 to $1,000 a year in bank fees alone. And that in my mind is just wasted money.
Right.
So,
wow. All right. Well, that's good advice. Yeah. I didn't realize that the local banks were a lot friendlier to local businesses like that.
Yep.
Now, let's talk about expenses a little bit more, because I think sometimes people don't always know what is and what isn't. Is there a general way to sort of assess what should be an acceptable expense just for anybody? I know you can't get into all the specifics, but is there a way to think about it?
One way to kind of narrow down whether or not something is business related or a deduction for your business would kind of be to say, is this making me money? Am I incurring this expense with the hope that I will generate money out of this, or it's going to bring me an opportunity that's going to pay me down the road? If the answer is yes, then it's likely a business expense. You can deduct it. If the answer is no, then, if you're just out with your buddies and you're having some beers and you're kind of talking about this stuff, but you're not really, the conversation's just between friends and it's not going to go anywhere, that's probably more of a personal thing, and you wouldn't want to deduct that on your taxes.
Okay. We might go spend a lot of time talking about recording with our friends. It's true. It turns out we're really into this stuff. Okay, then what about some of the bigger questions? So a lot of people are considering building their studio space, whether they're sort of treating the inside of the space, or some people might be actually building a dedicated building for it outside of their home or a commercial space. What are some ways to think about construction that it takes? Because the studio is a place that is unusual, where you need to have special walls and you really have to make the stuff work and sound right.
So that's going to be a little trickier to answer, but in general, if you're going to construct a separate structure, or if you're going to remodel an entire room, and we're talking, tens of thousands of dollars to do this type of work, that type of expense, that type of outlay would result back to what you said earlier, the depreciation. That is something that's probably going to take a few years to write off, but you'll still get credit for it and it's still deductible. You just need to be okay with, if I put 50 in today, it's going to take me maybe 5 or 10 years to write the 50 off to get the benefit from an expense standpoint. So you still want to have meaningful income coming in to offset that with things like that.
Right. Well, that can be a benefit, because then each year you're writing off 10,000 instead of the first year writing off 50 when you didn't, and maybe you didn't make so much the first year if you're just starting out.
Right. I mean, there's pros and cons to accelerating how fast you write things off. It's like you said, do you want a little bit each year, or do you want to just get it all up front and then pay the taxes down the road? And, it kind of depends. Kind of depends on what you think is going to happen. If you're going to have really good years following that, if you're just trying to keep up with things and you really need the tax break now, might make sense to accelerate things. So it's really kind of case specific.
Right. Which is why it's great to have a relationship with somebody who's helping you, a CPA or a bookkeeper, so that you can address all these questions for your own situation.
Absolutely.
Talking about construction, it makes me think about the questions of loans. Do you have any advice for people, or just any ways to think about whether it's smart to take out loans against a business, or to try and avoid that? Is credit a safe way to go as you grow your business?
Well, what I think a stumbling block for a lot of new business owners is there's a kind of a misconception. This is, they take a loan out under the business name and it's not their problem anymore, but it is, because nowadays banks pretty much rely upon the owners of the business to guarantee those loans. So if your business goes belly up, you still have to pay back the loan. So my advice would be, certainly don't borrow more than you need. Don't borrow more than you're comfortable paying back if you didn't have the income from your business to support the payback. Mm-hmm. And if possible, try to go cash in. I mean, borrowing to start a business is extremely risky. So if you can limit that or keep it to a minimum, I think that's going to benefit any business owner in the long run.
I remember taking a class when I was at MTSU. It was a legal class, sort of talking about the legalities of business and stuff. And the teacher, who was a lawyer, he had this expression. He said OPM, which you always want to start something with
other
OPM,
people's money.
Other people's money. But I think your advice is well-founded, because it's a reminder that it's not other people's money, it's your own when you're starting out by taking loans to grow your studio. So do it in a smart way. I've certainly evolved where, I did a lot of borrowing to do some things, and then I ran into some real struggles, and it took me quite a long time to finally pay that off. And now I like to approach it where I try and do everything cash in. I try and not have to take out a loan in order to make the next move.
Yeah, and I think when people want to expand their business, they may not have the capital, so they need the loan to do it. But if that loan is going to be a really big number, then that might be an indicator too. Maybe you're not ready for this next step. If you need to borrow that much money to make this next move, maybe you really need to consider, is that the right direction? Or should you save up and try to scale into it slowly?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that most people are going to be dealing with is it's like letting the air out of the balloon slowly, or out of the tire. You're going to get all these credit card offers, and it's a little bit here and a little on that one and a little on that one. And you might think, oh man, I'll pick up these mics. I'll pick up the laptop. I'll get this new piece of studio gear. And no individual one is a huge purchase, but before you know it, maybe you've piled up a whole bunch of stuff and it can start to get away from you. So that's my encouragement, rock stars, is to really be cautious about taking out loans or using credit cards to start building your studio. There are always stories of somebody who did that, and it sounds wonderfully risky in a way and pretty rock and roll, but it's not much fun to go through. But if your credit cards get out of hand, it really sucks, and it's really hard to sort of come back from. And you don't want to ever, try and go for bankruptcy as a solution to getting out from under a whole bunch of credit card debt. Right.
Yeah, that's like a nuclear bomb, right? So you just want to be careful with how much you borrow and why you're borrowing it.
Yeah. All right, cool. Another bit of advice that this teacher gave was, he was talking about dealing with taxes and deductions and the stuff we're talking about. And he was talking about how your goal is tax avoidance, not tax evasion, which I thought was a great quote, which is like, it's 100% okay. And again, I'm no legal, I can't give legal advice in this department, but I can talk about what I remember hearing. And it's my understanding is 100% okay to set tax avoidance as your goal, where you're trying to use legal ways to avoid having to, give away your money to Uncle Sam, but not tax evasion. Tax evasion is, doing things that are not okay. And tax avoidance is like, this is the smart way to manage your money so that you're trying to keep it and grow your income for your studio.
Yeah, that's great advice. Don't underreport income. Don't over-report deductions. Work within the confines of the law. Don't pay more tax than you legally are required to.
Right.
But if you get into tax evasion or tax fraud, that's the stuff that can come back to you forever. And, if they find it 20 years from now and they want to open it up and come for you, they will. So just keep your receipts, be documented, and do what's reasonable within the law.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll take a break here for just a minute, and we're going to come back in for the second half of the show, the jam session. We're going to dig into more of the details of how you can keep track of this stuff here with Jared. And we'll see you guys in just a minute for the jam session. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Otherworld Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your existing Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD drive, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio far into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. If you want to design and build a great house, then you're going to need great tools. You could build it with an old hammer and some nails, but it's a whole lot easier to use an air compressor and a nail gun. Well, the same thing goes for mixing. If you really want to create a pro-sounding mix, then it makes a lot of sense to start with a great toolbox of awesome plugins. This is where Boz Digital Labs comes in to help you get killer mixes easily, quickly, and creatively. Provocative will make your vocals sound lush and wide. Transgressor and Manic Compressor can help your drums leap out of the speakers. Gatey Weighty and Big Beautiful Door offer unique new ways to tighten up your tracks, while The Wall will make sure your mixes are in your face and competitive. And my favorite is Sasquatch Kick Machine, which can transform your kick drum from sounding like a home studio cardboard box into the perfect punchy kick without using samples or triggers. To download your unlimited trial of any plugin now or get one of Boz's free plugins, go to bozdigitallabs.com and put the best in your mixing toolbox. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. If you want to capture every nuance of a great performance in your studio, then you need to start with a microphone that is crafted with great care and attention to detail. JZ Mics in Riga, Latvia designs amazing sounding microphones that are handcrafted with jeweler's precision to bring you incredible detail in your recordings. At the heart of JZ microphones is the unique Golden Drop capsule design, which uses a lighter, faster diaphragm that delivers great clarity and fidelity while avoiding distracting colorations and distortions. Make sure to check out the Black Hole series BH1S and BH2 with the awesome looking hole in the middle of the mic, combining innovative industrial design with meticulous electrical engineering to help your studio sound incredibly expensive for an affordable price. JZ offers a 5-year warranty, free shipping to the US, and 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, for a limited time, if you use the coupon ROCKSTAR, you will get an astonishing 50% off. I got one. You're hearing my voice right now on the BH1S. So what are you waiting for, rock stars? Go to jzmic.com or click the link in the show notes below. Hey, rock stars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Jared Eliseo, joining us from North Carolina, talking about keeping track of your money with your studio and preparing for taxes and just making sure that you're doing everything right with your business. You ready to jam, Jared?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
All right, cool. So we thought we'd just point out one more time, you reminded me that to talk specifically about the tax side of things is always a little tricky because it's so case specific per individual. And it even changes year to year, depending on what kind of tax rulings they have. Do you have any thoughts you want to say about that topic?
No, I think, you've kind of nailed it on the head. It's really hard to give general advice. So if there are listeners out there who need more information, they can certainly reach out to me and we can always have that conversation. Or I'd encourage them to seek out local professional help, someone that they can get the specific answer that they're looking for. Let's let's not, worry too much about what the internet tells us to do. It's always best to get it direct from the horse's mouth. So,
Right.
and then that way it's catered specifically for that individual too.
I might as well give a shout out. So how can the Rockstars find you if they do want to reach out to you?
Sure. They can, best way to contact me is by email. So, and I think you're going to leave that in the show notes.
Yeah,
Yes?
but you can tell them now, and I'll put it in the show notes too.
Sure. It's Jared, Jared, at Eliseo CPA, ELISEO CPA.com.
Okay, cool.
And,
great.
Yeah, you email me, just leave me a little note and say, hey, I heard you on the podcast, and drop your question and I'll get back to you.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, so moving forward, there is some stuff that we can get into the specifics of a little bit more, which is sort of the how-to process of managing, keeping track of things, right?
Right.
What are some of the tools and resources that we want to know about as far as, you talked about just sort of keeping a spreadsheet. I love Google Docs. I think Google Docs is a really easy way to keep track of things like spreadsheets and kind of always have them at your fingertips. I'm sure you could use something else. Pen and paper is probably even useful at the beginning, right?
Yeah, if you do nothing else and you write it on pen and paper, that's better than doing nothing. So That's like the caveman edition of the accounting world nowadays. But if it's a must, then that's what you got to do. So start with that. Grow into spreadsheets, even Google Sheets, Microsoft Excel, whatever you want to use. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. Just a simple, income column, expense column. Keep track of each thing. If you need help at the end of the year when you're doing your taxes, you can at least with the description of what you purchased or what the income was for, someone will be able to help you put that together.
Right. Okay, so let's say we're beyond that stage. Let's say we're like, dude, I'm ready to just like what service should I use? What app should I use? Do you have any recommendations about useful apps for keeping track of your income, keeping track of your expenses? Let's not forget that one of the things that we need to do is we need to actually easily collect money too. So we need to accept payments. We need to invoice people, send receipts, all that.
Right. There are thousands of ways, it seems, that you could do this. You can send your invoicing through Venmo. You can send your invoicing through PayPal. You can email people and they can email you money back. And that's all great ways. Technology has really come a long way. But try to keep it in one house, meaning with one platform. It's going to simplify your life. If you're using all these other platforms, you still have to cobble them together at the end of the year to get the answer. So My go-to, and I guess I'll plug it as a recommendation. I would say QuickBooks Online is probably the best solution for accounting purposes. There is a free accounting platform called Wave Apps, and you could use that as well to get started. But I don't feel that interface is as user-friendly as QuickBooks. QuickBooks has done a great job at making this understandable for non-accountants, which most business owners are exactly that. They're not accountants. They don't have an accounting background. So I think the QuickBooks platform does a great job at illustrating what they need to do. And you tell me, you use it. What do you think of QuickBooks Online?
Well, I think it's pretty awesome. Honestly, I remember, rewind 10, 20 years, and I remember the initial struggles of trying to go, I need to use QuickBooks, or I need to use Quicken, I guess was the other one that's sort of the personal one. And then you had to install it on your computer, and then you had to jump through all these hoops to try and like link it to your bank account to download stuff, and it never worked. And then I would immediately just get tripped up by it and not be able to figure it out. But when I started working with you, you encouraged me to check out QuickBooks Online, and there's still it's still pretty expert in Ninja as far as what's possible in there. But I found I didn't have to do all that. I just needed to use it, and I was able to hire you to help manage the bookkeeping aspect of it and make sure everything was organized and categorized properly. It's like it allowed me to easily connect to accounts so that income comes in through it, and expenses are kept track of. But it also allowed you to take it to the next expert level as far as, getting things ready for taxes and making sure that everything is properly, put in its proper place. But also the invoicing feature. And again, I had Larry Crane on the podcast early on, and that was his recommendation, was QuickBooks Online for invoicing from your studio. And like as a use case functionality, the idea that like, oh, you're at the movies you're about to watch a movie and take a break with your kid, and you remember that somebody didn't pay an invoice, and you just pull up your phone, hit the send button, and it goes off, and it's like you don't have to think about it again. It's the reminder. That kind of stuff that's like, it's hard to put a value on that, because having a tool that will make it easy for you to collect money for your studio and for your work is, takes a huge amount of stress off of you.
Yeah, for sure. I love the invoicing feature of QuickBooks. Even if people want to pay me in cash, they still get you still get an invoice. And the nice thing is I can match that money to the invoice, but they also have a built-in payment option. So they offer free ACHs. So if you're using it to invoice customers and they want to pay you electronically, they just enter their banking info. They can pay you. It takes about a week for the funds to clear, but there's no cost to them. There's no cost to you either. If you want to accept credit cards, you can turn that on. You can give that option. There is a fee for that, just like with any other credit card processing, but you'll get the money within a day or two. It's pretty quick, but it's all digital. And it's kind of like you said, you can keep track of everything that's been paid or not paid. And the nice thing about that is if anyone kind of wants to put up an argument and say, well, I paid you for this, well, you can go in and show them, no, it's still open. I'm still showing this as unpaid on my side. And there's an audit history built into the invoice, so you can see exactly who looked at it, when they looked at it, when it was paid, things like that. So it's got a lot of power to it.
Yeah, that was a big one, is like you send the invoice to somebody, and if it's not, if it hasn't been paid, you're like, man, did they see my email? Do I need to remind them again? Then you look and you see that they've already looked at it. It's like, okay, they just haven't paid it yet, So it's great to be able to do that. Now, what about PayPal? Because I know PayPal is a common way that people will, pay for things in the studio. I don't think it's in part of. I don't think QuickBooks has a PayPal button in it. Is that right?
PayPal and QuickBooks do work together, but not in the best of ways. I think it's an okay integration. If you wanted to use PayPal to send and receive money and to purchase expenses, you could, and then feed that information over to QuickBooks to kind of organize it. But you would lose that functionality of QuickBooks being able to track invoices for you. Or if you tried to use it, you would have basically two systems that you have to work between. So that's kind of back to my earlier point. I would say stick with one or the other. I know that PayPal is maybe a little bit more common in your world and a little bit more user-friendly, but I think the benefit of learning QuickBooks Online and just getting accustomed to that has that long-term payoff to it.
Right, indeed. Well, I know that let's say you wanted to send an invoice to somebody and they might want to pay you through PayPal, or they might want to just pay you with a credit card. If it's a PayPal invoice, I think they can still do either for payment. And if it's a QuickBook invoice, they can pay you with a credit card, or you could just give them, your PayPal address in there and say, if you want to pay through PayPal, just do that. And then I think all you have to do is just manually click that the invoice was paid yourself. So that's not that much. It's not that hard to keep track of. What are some other things about what goes on inside QuickBooks? What are some general ways that you describe how to visualize where income goes and where expenses go, or to the extent that we can talk about it, like what kind of categories make sense and things like that?
Well, so I think the income side is exactly what we just talked about. It's that invoicing process, and then any money that might come in outside of that that's considered income, it just kind of pops up as a deposit to your bank account. So you can make a judgment call. Hey, did I put that money in there? Was that someone paying me for something that I didn't invoice? Or did I just put that money in because the business needed money? You'll have to kind of narrow those ones out separately. But from the expense tracking standpoint, sky's the limit. All the categories under the sun exist in there, to include like office supplies, equipment, meals. You would have to add in a few accounts to get started, probably something like maybe auto expenses if you're using those. But like studio rental fees, that's not going to be a standard account in QuickBooks, but you can easily add all of that in. There's so much knowledge out there too. You can just kind of Google, how do I add an account in QuickBooks Online? And it takes about a minute to do. So,
right. So if you're going out and booking studios, now what if you're actually paying other people to help you do what you do? What if you have to hire musicians for sessions, or you have an assistant engineer that you work with? Are there any smart ways to kind of manage that?
Yeah, so you can actually enter vendors in, and you would enter those individuals as vendors into QuickBooks. And the nice thing is, for 1099 tracking, you can determine who's 1099, who's not. You can click a box. It'll keep track of that. So the end of the year, when you have to issue 1099s, you've already got your list of who and how much, and you can even file those in QuickBooks if you need to. So there's a lot of functionality on that side too. It lets you create the vendors, track who you're paying, how much, the date that you paid them, things like that. I think even with some of the bigger subscriptions of QuickBooks, you can integrate payment right in QuickBooks to that vendor.
Okay. Let's back up just a sec. What's a 1099?
1099, that is, so I said earlier, if you receive a Form W-9, that's a request for information. The 1099 is a form that you'll receive at the end of the year from somebody who's paid you, and it shows the total amount they paid you for an entire tax year. So
right. So if you're getting hired repeatedly by a particular band to make their record, if they've got their act together, they'll send you a 1099 if it's more than $600 a year, right?
Correct.
And the benefit of 1099s is that it sort of deletes that income it deletes that expense if you're the business from the equation of your taxable expenses, right?
It adds the expense. It justifies the expense that you have on your books. So if you're paying somebody to help you in your studio do anything, sound engineering, you pay them $5,000 for the year. Now you can justify that $5,000 expense to you, and that person now has to, report income on their side. But it's also the legal requirement in the tax world that you need to issue these 1099s. So
yeah, and again, we can't get it too deep into the legal advice, but I know that one of the things to at least research is whether or not you actually should be hiring somebody as an employee versus whether or not it's the occasional contracted thing that you're hiring them for. One of the things that's always been a little tricky for me to remember is the moment you turn to pay somebody as part of your business, you need to immediately ask yourself, I should probably have them fill out a W-9 form right now before I even send the first payment. Mm-hmm. Is there a strategy that you advise people in terms of doing that an easy way?
Yeah, exactly what you said. Download that form. I would have that conversation up front with somebody if you're going to hire them, even, in that preliminary stage. Hey, I'm going to have you fill out Form W-9. That's so I can issue you a 1099 at the end of the year. And I would have them do that before they do any work for you and before you cut that first check, because they have no responsibility to do it for you. So if you don't ask them, they don't need to fill it out for you. And you don't want to be, you don't want it to be January 15th and you have to start putting this information together. You can't get it because these people flaked out on you, or, something happened and they're not around to get a hold of. So
Right. That's not fun.
No. It happens all the time. So
as far as being the business and making sure you do that properly, you can just go out to the IRS website, I think, and just download the W-9 form.
Yep.
I know that one of the very useful tools inside Google Drive is something called Doc Hub, where you can send a form to somebody and then they can, easily digitally fill it out and sign it and send it back. One consideration, I know people tend to send things like W-9 forms all over the internet, but I think I just want to remind us all to be cautious of being responsible for somebody else's social security number and making sure that you sort of keep that safe and in a smart way. Do you have any tips for that, Jared? Is there anything that people kind of often forget about and you want to remind them?
Stay away from email. Please stop emailing social security numbers to each other. This includes tax documents or documents that have social security numbers on them. It's like nonstop. At this point, I can't stop people from I can't stop them from sending it to me, but I can at least ask them not to.
What's a good way to get it to somebody?
I have a Dropbox link that I just leave open, and I send that link to people when I need sensitive information, and it hits Dropbox, and that's bank level encryption, and I pull that off Dropbox immediately. So
okay.
That's a safer way than email.
So maybe a cool tip for us is if you're going to work with somebody, you're maybe the email is where the conversation begins about hiring somebody. At that point, Rockstars, we can say, hey, would love to have you work on this project. Just a heads up, here's a W-9 form. Please fill this out. And here's the return Dropbox link, and just drop it in there when you're done. And that's a safe way to potentially return that signed, filled out W-9 form to us.
Yeah, that's perfect. The reality, I think the real way it's going to happen is you're going to get an email back with that form attached to it, which that's on the sender for doing that. So
right. Well, at least I guess if somebody does send it to us, we could download it and then maybe just delete that email, and then we've done something to try and help keep it safe. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you are ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you in whichever DAW you are using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to mix in your own studio, and even include in your mixing portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Okay, cool. So we've W-9'd somebody. They've done the work for us. So you say in QuickBooks, you can check a box that says, hey, this person's been W-9'd. Therefore, at the end of the year, you can see if you paid them more than $600?
Correct. You can run a report and kind of figure out pretty quickly, oh, yes, I paid these 5 people more than $600, and I had them identified as contractors, so now I need to issue 1099s. And the system will help you do that. So it's from that side of the house, too, that's another great benefit of QuickBooks Online is it just tracks that information. It's kind of click the button end of the year. You don't really need to deal with anything.
Right. And this is good to know. I think in our minds, we always think about April, that's tax, April. Well, the 1099 stuff happens in January. It happens right away as soon as the year is over. You have to get those out before the end of January or something like that. So Rockstar's reminder to make sure that you got all your ducks in a row right away so that at the end of the year, you're getting all those 1099s out the door. And then you, hopefully when April comes and it's tax season, this is a whole lot easier than it ever was in the past,
Right.
Another thing that I know QuickBooks offers in the app, that I get a lot of ads talking about the mileage feature. I think it's got something in there that will built in track your mileage for you so that you can keep track of that when you're out and about. And that's something that we don't always think about. But, for example, if you're driving from your house to the studio all the time, or if you have driving that you have to do that's actually part of your work, literally, I think even if it's just driving to the music store to go, buy supplies for your studio, I think that's all deductible mileage tracking.
It would be. I would say avoid QuickBooks. Now, this is one of the shortcomings of QuickBooks. I would avoid their mileage tracker. That's only available right now, to my knowledge. It's only available in the self-employed edition, which I would not recommend using that.
Okay.
But you could still use something like MileIQ or any other mileage tracker app, because like you said, mileage tends to be one of the largest expenses for self-employed people or contracted individuals. And we want to be able to keep track of that in a nice, neat way, as opposed to having the notebook, or the running joke is it's the end of the year. I mean, I'm getting emails left and right, currently during tax season. Yeah, I drove 10,000 miles for business last year. Well, okay, all my clients amazingly have driven 10,000 miles for business.
Right.
So let's try to be a little bit more accurate with our mileage trackers. But it's as simple as, if you get one of these apps, it's just swipe left, swipe right, business or personal. You can usually add categories in as well. So maybe you were going for a studio recording session, or maybe you were going for a meal or a meeting. You can have different types of categories too.
Right.
On the mileage.
I guess another thing is if you're out and about and you're buying supplies, some of which are personal, some of which are for the studio, if you have those two different bank accounts, you're checking out at the grocery store and you're getting stuff that's actually just for the studio, you could, just make two purchases and then keep track of the receipt for one. So let's talk about that for a sec. What are some ways that you find are smart as far as keeping track of receipts for expenses? First of all, do we need receipts? What is that even important?
To my knowledge, you do need a receipt, but you could probably be okay with just a digital copy of it. And I'll tell all the listeners right now, I do not keep paper receipts. So
I'm trying not to.
I scan everything. It's not like I have endless amounts of them. And at this point, most of my receipts are digital. So it's a lot of software, or I get emails for a lot of my purchases. So I just save the emails. A great way to do this would be, you could go onto Google Drive. You could set up folders by year. You could set up a 2019 folder and then have each month separately in there. And you could just dump your receipts, PDFs, scanned pictures, whatever, into that folder for that month. And then you have all of your receipts in one place.
Yeah. I found that the idea of scanning receipts was really enticing, but then the process of scanning receipts was often like a headache. So for example, my example would be, Lidge just finished a delicious meal with a client or something like that. And, or I'm checking out, at the store, and somebody else is waiting in line behind me and they give me the receipt and I'm trying to take a photo of it. And I try and put it into the QuickBooks app, and it was like 10 button clicks, too many questions I had to answer. And then, you're holding everybody up in line. So I finally found a way that was very, very simple for myself. And I think this would, just for whoever you are, figure out your own way, but you might try something like this. I just take a photo with the photo app of my phone, and then usually there's a share button immediately. And if I hit the share button, I use Evernote as well as Google Docs, and Evernote lets you sort of have a pre-selected notebook that note is going to go into. And so I just have one for receipts. And so that's the first thing that pops up. And then it's like you can, use the voice button and sort of say in what what that expense was for, hit the send button, and it's already put into a folder for you, which is great. Another nice thing about Evernote is that those receipts that are printed or even handwritten stuff, as long as it's legible, Evernote makes those searchable text. So later on, if you were trying to find a receipt for something, you could type in the search feature and you should be able to find it, which is pretty hip.
That's cool.
Yeah, but so anyway, that's, I know I'm geeking out here, but that's my super fast and quick way. I like to do things as fast as I can.
Oh, sure. I mean, I would do it in real time. You can also save your receipts for the end of the month and scan them all or take pictures. But I think a lot of people kind of get to where you're at, Lidge, like, okay, it's the end of the month. Do I really want to scan this stack of paper receipts? Or,
right.
It just seems so daunting. Try to do whatever you're doing on a consistent basis, though. Don't wait until the end of the year. At that point, you're going to be very discouraged. So just once a week, once every couple of weeks would be ideal. Well,
one of the challenges, too, with taking a photo of a receipt in the moment is at the times where I thought, I should connect this to the particular transaction in QuickBooks, a lot of times the transaction doesn't exist yet because it hasn't gone through. Mm-hmm. So there was nothing to connect it to. So I found it was easy to just kind of have a master folder that you can just put everything in, which is great. What are some other questions? What are some questions I haven't asked you about yet that we really need to remind people of as far as, running QuickBooks, keeping things organized? How do they find a bookkeeper and a CPA? So if you're interested in, first off, you can use me. You can always contact me for any of these services. You can Google your local results and see what you get, or search whatever search engine you want to use, see who's out there around you. If you're using QuickBooks Online, they also have a Pro Advisor website that you can search, which will have certified professionals all the way down to non-certified professionals, but you can read people's bios and things like that and the reviews on there. And that's probably a good place to start if you're looking for a QuickBooks expert. Something that I would encourage the listeners to the audience to do is interview whoever it is that you're going to hire. You want to make sure that they understand what you do and understand what it is that they need to do for you too. Not just, this isn't just pushing numbers around in a fancy app or on a spreadsheet and giving you the results. You want to build a relationship with this person. Ideally, this person's going to work with you for several years, and you want to be able to email them and ask them a question or give them a phone call and get an answer that doesn't take 3 weeks. At the bare minimum, you want that professional to at least say, hey, I'm too busy right now to deal with this. Can I get back to you when I have time? Rather than just completely not, ignoring your request. So I think that communication is key with whoever it is that gets hired or whoever you decide to work with. But those are some of the ways that you can find somebody. You could probably look on Facebook or Craigslist too. It doesn't really matter where they are geographically or what was I going to say? I lost my thought. Oh, that's all right. I was going to jump in too and reveal the fact that you and I have never met face to face. So Rockstars, I've been working with Jared for a couple of years, and I actually found you, Jared, by doing that very same thing where I went to Craigslist. And I think the first time you do that, the first time you decide to work with somebody else with your finances, it's a little, you're like, you just don't know what it's going to be like. Is that okay? I don't know. What does it mean? Or you're wondering, like, what does it mean to open up my banking to somebody else? And I think we could talk about that a little bit, because it's very doable. I did do an interview with you, and we were on the same page about a lot of stuff. So we decided to start working together. And it works fantastic, and of course it's so easy to do a video chat with somebody and have a face-to-face conversation. With screen sharing, for example, it was easy, Jared, for you to show me how to do things in QuickBooks Online, get that one-on-one as needed. I mean, once you showed me the initial stuff, we don't have to talk very often about it at all. So it totally works. And what else was I going to say about that? I guess just going through the process of finding somebody, knowing that you can work with somebody who's not necessarily local to you. You just want somebody who really understands the system and the technology well, so that it works great. If you're using something like QuickBooks. And I guess the other part I wanted to mention was the idea of letting somebody sort of inside the world of your bank account. It's very set up to be able to do that. So with your banks, maybe you can talk about that. What does it mean to give a bookkeeper login for QuickBooks and things like that? Do you want to just introduce the Rockstars to how to think about that?
Sure. So the user or the owner of the account will have their own access. So Liz, you own your own file, your QuickBooks file. You have your own access to it. I'm your accountant that also has access to it. So I can see and do all of the things that I need to do. I actually have access to special accountant tools that let me do things a little quicker for you. And that's if something is messed up or broken, it's just easier for me to fix problems. But I can't deactivate the file or anything like that. And from within QuickBooks, I can't go and write myself checks or anything like that. There are limitations to what QuickBooks will allow, so that people don't steal from each other, and there's none of that going on.
Right. I can't even say it. QuickBooks wouldn't have been around very long if that's the way it worked, right?
Absolutely. So, but then there's the banking side of it too. So sometimes I have to look up checks. Sometimes I need to see the actual check image. And you and I have a relationship where I have access to an account, but what you've done is you went to your bank and said, hey, I want to give my accountant access. I only want to give them what's known as read-only access. So I can see everything, but I can't write myself checks. I can't transfer money to myself. I can't steal from you. I can only see the information. You
can't sell my studio and go down to Aruba for the week?
Nope, unfortunately not. Can't rent it out for you. Can't do anything like that. So, and that's good for me because I don't have to worry about the liability that you're claiming I steal money from you. It's like, well, I don't even have that capability. So how could I?
Right.
So,
but I think that's wonderful, because once you start doing this stuff, you realize that there's systems set up to make it all actually work. It's not, I just remember before ever doing this, the first question you have is you're like, wait, somebody can get into my bank account. What is that? What's that all about? But it totally works. And then the other thing that's really interesting too is, we have a relationship in a working system where you have access to records, because that's the task that needs to happen, is keeping track of the records and reporting this stuff. But if and when the time comes where I think, you know what, I really would like you to be responsible for making payments for certain things, then that's totally doable, right?
Right. That would be probably the next level of banking access, because then I would need the authority to write checks or send transfers out to people. But you could probably put safeguards in place, certain daily limits and certain payees. I'm sure that the banks are sophisticated enough in that.
Right.
You don't need to give me full access to everything. I mean, we've been able to do limited access thus far. I'm sure we could continue that too.
Right. So, for example, if somebody is trying to grow their studio and they're like ready to have 10 employees or something, which would be a pretty awesome studio, you can actually work with your bookkeeper to have them manage the whole payroll and take care of all that stuff. It's all very doable. And so that's pretty cool, but you don't have to start there. It doesn't have to be this huge complicated thing before you even get going. You can start out with something very simple where there's just enough access to make sure that you can just keep track of your taxes while you get going.
Right.
Cool. What other stuff should we talk about? What other questions? This will be on YouTube as well, and there's the ability to drop in comments. So do you have any questions for the Rockstars about what you want to know about them and their businesses?
I hadn't really thought about that, but so I know when we met, you were doing some recording. You've actually recorded some albums. Is that right?
Oh yeah. I'm recording.
Yeah.
I've been making records professionally since really about 1995.
Awesome. And you're still active in that, right? I mean, you're still doing that every day. And
Sure. Yeah. I'm recording my own stuff here. I'm recording, I can go record remotely. I still get hired out or contracted out for various things.
cool. And so is that where you're at now? You're trying to help educate others on how to, do their own recording for other studios or for other clients and rock stars and groups and things like that?
Yep, 100%. That's what Recording Studio Rockstars is all about. It's just helping everybody make their best record ever.
Nice. And so what's, for the audience, what's the general type of recording? I guess how does the process work? Can you give me the 2-minute version of that?
Yeah. So let's actually just leave that as a question to be answered. Rockstars, sure. What is the 2-minute version of what you're trying to do, and what are some of the struggles that you go through as far as keeping track of bookkeeping? What answers would you like answered? Because Jared and I will both see the comments in the YouTube and be able to answer them. And then a reminder that I also, as I usually do, have in the show notes a YouTube playlist, which I put together, which is a bunch of the videos that Jared's already been creating on his own YouTube channel to help you answer some of these questions and make sure that you're, starting your business and building things right and getting all this stuff set up properly.
Very good.
So go check that out. Well, Jared, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us, man. It's been a blast hanging out with you. And hopefully this will really help some people out and just give people a starting place. Remind everybody where they can go to reach out to you and connect with you.
Sure. So it's best by email. You can go to my website, EliseoCPA.com, and you can shoot me an email, jared@EliseoCPA.com. You can find me on Facebook too, Eliseo CPA. My firm has a page. Drop me a note there. And then on YouTube, I'm not as active anymore, but I'm trying to restart that engine. I'm the Mr. CPA. So if you want to look up my channel and see what I've got out there for content, I'd be, check it out, see if there's something out there that'll help you. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, dude, thanks so much, man. I'm going to let you get back to work. I know it's a busy season for you. So thank you very much for taking time out from your busy work. This has been great. Yeah, thank you. All right, man. We'll talk soon, dude. Cheers. Yeah, you too. Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. Also, remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with these weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com. Look for the link in the show notes. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio, all totally free. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.